So now you're basically having faith in the technical prowess of the programmers.
I have a technical faith that they will be mainly correct. I think software engineers no way
now
will
I
be
have to point you.
perfect, but they will be mainly correct. I'm Tilek Mamutov, and you're watching Doom Debates.
Hey everybody, welcome to Doom Debates. Today my guest is Tilek Mamutov. He is originally from Kyrgyzstan. He is a software engineer and has worked at Google for 11 years as an engineer and a technical program manager. He worked on Project Loon. He worked at Google X. He recently quit his job and has been back to Kyrgyzstan for the last few years working on his own company, which specializes in getting software engineers to come to the US, get a much higher salary, fill the needs that US companies have, and he's been doing great with that. His background also includes about 10 years ago joining the Rationality community and going to a boot camp put on by the Center for Applied Rationality. So we're going to be diving in a little bit to his background and his journey as somebody who kind of became worried about AI doom and today is not so much, and we can debate that.
Great. Yes, we help people join American companies, but usually it's in Europe, Canada, and other countries because US visa is quite interesting. Let's say you are a software engineer in Kyrgyzstan, in Central Asia. Mm-hmm. Your salary is $10,000. You get a job at Google. Your salary becomes $100,000, and you move to a kind of more developed, safer country.
Great. So I myself, like I suspect 98% of people watching this, know absolutely nothing about Kyrgyzstan. So can you just give us a couple fun facts about like the culture there or what it's like?
Sure. No, I love talking about Kyrgyzstan. This could be a multi-hour podcast, but I'll be quick. So original culture is similar to Mongols. So we are nomads. We are definitely different. Even the yurts. Mongol yurts are more flat because they are in windy areas. We're in high mountains, beautiful areas, and they are more kind of like a semi-sphere because it has there is not much problem with wind, but it has more precipitation, like snow and rain. So that's how the type of yurt is different. So we lived like that for thousands of years, and then we joined Soviet Union. So we integrated with like a Russian culture. So I speak Russian language fluently. And so yeah, it's kind of nomadic culture, then about 100 years influence, Russian influence and Soviet influence, beautiful mountains. And we are the furthest country from any ocean or sea. This is kind of like a fun fact. Yeah, it's a cool country. I like it. Usually people, when they come, they are positively surprised because if your country ends with "stan," usually it's
right.
usually not a good.
Right.
The associations are usually not very good. Sorry?
Is it a modern culture, high quality of life?
I have a very high quality of life, given kind of if you earn a few $1,000 a month, you can have a very high quality of life. It's quite safe. I mean, safer in San Francisco in many ways, I would say. So yeah, I would say it's quite a high quality of life. I mean, there are some challenges with like air quality, air pollution in winter, stuff like that. But in general, it's pretty good. I mean, it's a developing country, so rule of law is not that great. But honestly, I don't feel it that much. And I think now is a pretty good time for the country. It's developing really fast. So yeah, just kind of enjoying my time here.
All right. So for all the people out here watching Doom Debates, I want you to represent how knowledgeable you are, that when the conversation turns to yurts, I want you to remember that the ones in Kyrgyzstan are rounded, correct?
Yes, they are more rounded in Central Asian yurts. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Mongols are more flat. So if you see a yurt, if AI draws a yurt, you can see which one is it. So they're kind of quite different. There's kind of two types.
Awesome.
Two general types.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Fascinating. So tell me what made you interested in the Doom issue in the first place and even maybe convinced you, and then how you became unconvinced.
Sure. First, I think it was Tim Urban's Wait But Why blog. He had a long post about oncoming AGI. I don't remember the exact term he used, but it was about kind of really like a super intelligence coming soon, and that it brings dangers with it. And I kind of immediately kind of accepted the idea that it's there seems to be risks, right? I took it kind of too hard, but I didn't take it enough to heart to kind of do something about it. Right? So it was kind of like level 1. And then I went to CFAR, but the goal was the Center for Applied Rationality training. It's like a multi-day bootcamp, but the goal was not to kind of get to know about AI issue. The goal was kind of to improve my own life. Kind of selfish. But through that, I met people working at like Future of Humanity Institute and MIRI and multiple other organizations. And it's kind of like a huge overlap, right? The AI alignment community and the rationality community. So while talking to them, I consider them extremely smart people, some of the smartest people I've ever talked to. If I can compare, which I would argue that we should be very careful about kind of ranking intelligence. It's kind of like a tricky thing. But I felt like they were like some of the smartest people I've ever met, and they seemed also interested in the AI alignment and just kind of actually looking at the arguments behind the AI alignment. It seemed really serious. And then I actually did this quiz by 80,000 hours. That's the one.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they have
Rob
this
Lublin,
quiz where you kind of, they have this quiz where you put like your skills and maybe your passions, and it tells you like what's the most optimal thing you can do. And for me, the most optimal was starting my own company, which is exactly what I did.
That's great. Okay, so you've been on the path of rationality training, rationality advice, and you've become familiar with the doomer argument. Now, you recently tweeted that you're kind of over being super worried about AI doom, which was the impetus to have you on Doom Debates. So tell me about that. Why are you now a non-doomer? Let's debate.
Yeah. So I tried to actually sit down and imagine the scenarios of how it can play out. And when I tried to actually execute the scenarios, the most likely and the most negative ones, it seems very implausible. It seems that multiple unusual things have to happen for this really bad scenario to happen. And I broke them down step by step, and I'm really... This is very early framework, I would say. I did not spend too much time on it, so I would love to debate, but I think it's interesting. So the way I think about it, I would love to be corrected on this, kind of improve my thinking on this. First, AI technologies need to continue to develop pretty fast for this to be an issue really soon. That I believe will happen. Like a person, I think that's likely to happen, maybe like 80 to 90%, that the speed will continue, right? Kind of like exponential-ish, right? But it has to continue. Second thing is it should continue until the level it reaches this kind of really dangerous levels. On that one, I think this will happen. Right? I think it will get to a dangerous level soon, most likely. So that's where I am. I know there are some people who don't even believe that it may happen in 100 years. I think Robin Hanson kind of thinks it's going to be
so you're saying you do believe in short timeline, or you think short timeline is already not very plausible?
No, I think it's likely. The short time is likely.
Okay.
So that one I concede, if you believe so. So that one I'm with you. Most likely, I think it will be short timeline.
Okay.
Then the next thing that has to happen is this dangerous enough AI can cause an extinction. Dangerous enough AI did not get enough alignment mechanisms in place. That one, I think it's also likely, because I do agree that it's hard to put all the alignment mechanisms in place that kind of like to kind of close all holes. So that one I also agree with, but it's not 100%, right? So, but maybe it's 90%. The next one, I think that's the one that we may argue the most about. That's where the difference is the biggest potentially, is not only AI can execute a bad scenario, but it actually will. So not just you don't align it, but it will actually execute the scenario and actually use the loophole that we left out. That one, that's the biggest one for me. That it seems, I'm not sure why it would happen, right? I believe if it can, it doesn't mean it will. I think that's my core argument, the core crux. And lastly, the last two is even if it will, right? The world needs to be this way so that other AIs and humans and like human-built systems don't notice this bad, like really bad catastrophic scenario happening and are not able to stop, right? So I don't know like how likely is that. I put like 50-50-ish, right? I don't know how difficult it is to kind of notice and stop, right? And then the last one is, even if it is executed, then there's no way to roll it back. That one kind of, it depends on the definition of a catastrophic scenario. If by definition catastrophic scenario is the one that you cannot roll back, then kind of the last point doesn't matter. But the 2 points before that, for me, those are the kind of core points. If it can be bad, it doesn't mean it will be bad. And then even if it will be bad, it has to be bad so quickly and so good that other people are not able to notice it and stop it. So I think those two things kind of multiplied by each other, for me, bring the probability really low. Like I would love to kind of discuss those in most detail.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for spelling out your position. I think that's pretty clear. You mentioned a conjunction of different things that all have to be true in order to get AI do. And as I discussed with Robin Hanson, it's easy to keep listing things and make it sound like a conjunction of independent factors. And when you keep listing and listing, it's easy to pull for the argument of like, hey, look, you multiply these all out and you keep multiplying and it keeps getting smaller and smaller until it's like you're worried about a tiny probability. But of course, the trick there is the more stuff you're listing, the more likely you are to have a lot of dependence between multiple bullet points in your list so that it doesn't get multiplied again. Like it just kind of asymptotes out to like a pretty big probability, right? So that's like the standard way that conjunctions might not end up as small probabilities, right?
Yeah, no, I consider that. Yeah, definitely. And I saw your debate too. Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and now the first bullet points you mentioned, it sounds like you're actually riding past those stops on what I call the doom train. You're not getting off on those stops. For instance, you mentioned the stop where people are like, oh, AI is actually going to take a really long time to come. You're not getting off on that stop. You're still riding the doom train. You're like, no. I actually think that AI is going to come pretty soon. So I'm going to get off at the next stop where AI can be deadly, but it won't be deadly. That's my stop, right?
Yes, I think that's the one. Yes, I think it's a funny analogy. Yes. I think it's 90%, I would say. I gave 90 and 80, like, anyway, roughly somewhere there for the first two.
Right.
Basically, we will get there soon. We will get to the deadly, but it doesn't mean we'll use it. It's like the nuclear bombs. We have so many of them. Doesn't mean we use it. So, but we'll get to the dangerous place, and I feel like we'll feel safe.
Okay, so there's a lot of people who are pretty prominent who have already gotten off the doom train before you. There's a lot of people who are like, AI is just a technology. It's crazy to even make an analogy between AI and nuclear bombs. AI is just math. Math can't come murder you. It's a category error, to quote Mark Andreessen, one of the people who is really not taking the doom threat seriously. So you're basically saying, no, Mark, I'm still on the train. I'm riding the train all the way to the stop of like, it totally could kill everybody, but it won't.
Yeah, I watched Mark's video with Lex Fridman, the podcast. One point I remember from him is saying, if it's so smart, how is it not smart enough to kind of collaborate with humans? Something like that. But I'm butchering the argument, I'm sure.
Yeah, so Mark has made the point on some podcasts where he says, how can you have an AI which is so smart that it can take over the world, but so stupid that it doesn't realize that it has this bug that it's being unfriendly to humanity? And the obvious response is being really intelligent and robust at executing on a utility function doesn't mean that you see a bug in your utility function, right? You can have any arbitrary utility function, and in your mind as the AI, that's just the correct utility function. If it says kill all humans so that no human ever suffers again, if that's what it says, you won't be like, oh, let me debug that. You'd be like, yep, sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Yeah, so I think I don't agree with him on that.
Okay, great. So, I mean, that's definitely part of the exercise that we do here at Doom Debates. We are fleshing out the different non-doomer positions, and there's different doomer positions too. But it's actually a major goal of this podcast to just show people, like, look, there's a lot of different positions. It's not binary. And I think it's great that you're at least riding past the earliest stops on the Doom train. And Mark Andreessen is an example of somebody who gets off at one of the earliest stops I've seen. Robin Hanson actually got off even earlier. If you look at the Robin Hanson debate, he even gets off at like, I don't see why we should expect super intelligent AI necessarily in the next 100 years. So those are the very early stops. These people don't ride the train.
To bet money against him.
Right, exactly. Okay.
Prediction market.
All right. So now we can talk about your stop or the first stop, because you actually want to get off at a combination of multiple stops. So this question of AI can be deadly, but will it? You made the analogy to nukes, where it's like we have these nukes. If 1,000 nukes got launched, it might not wipe out every last human, but it would at least kill like a third of the human population, most experts think. And the rest of the human population, there's a quote from Annie Jacobson's recent book, Nuclear War, the living will envy the dead, right? Like that's the kind of outcome we're talking about. If somebody pushes, if somebody pushes a button to launch 1,000 nukes, which a lot of these triggers are automatic, one nuke could lead to a response of hundreds of nukes just because that's the strategic plan. Anyway, I highly recommend that book, Nuclear War. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because you're making this analogy where it's like, it's going to be fine because it's going to be like nuclear weapons. But don't you think that the equilibrium that we have with nuclear weapons is precarious? Like we're not in a stable equilibrium. We're in an equilibrium that every year has like a 1% chance of derailing.
I wasn't kind of trying to make like a clear analogy and saying because it's fine, but it's kind of like a similar-ish. I didn't want to kind of make a direct analogy. I just wanted to paint a similar picture, I would say.
But I think, the reason I'm bringing it up is just because, like, when you say it'll be nuclear weapons, you used it just as an example. You just wanted to abstract away the property that it could kill everybody, but it doesn't. And that's fine, but how do you imagine a scenario where you have something that's as potent as nuclear weapons, and yet somehow the equilibrium of not using it becomes more of a solved coordination problem than what we're seeing with nuclear weapons?
Okay, so I think based on the history, the default is a good scenario. I think that's my. So I feel like looking back at history, and we're kind of a bit kind of a Robin Hanson style. If we look back at the facts, right, the default scenario is good for me, right? We did not have a giant nuclear war, so I think the burden of proof in a way is on the person who is going to say something extremely bad is going to happen, likely, right? So because looking at the past, it seems even if we have all of those deadly weapons, like I think it's unlikely that those will be used. By default, it's unlikely unless I'm proven otherwise that it's very unusual. And I can try to kind of like to argue against myself. And because just before this,
can I jump in though?
Sure.
So it sounds like you're making a type of argument that in poker, I think they call resulting, where you're looking at a result that happens and you're kind of forgetting about the a priori distribution of probabilities of results that could have been, right? You could be like, oh, I made a terrible move, but I won the hand. I'm doing great. Everything's great. A really good analogy of resulting, I think, is if you look at the recent attempted assassination of former President Trump. I feel like you're looking at that and you're being like, the default is that presidents stay alive. It's like, that bullet really was going right for his brain. Like, that's not my takeaway.
Sure. Yeah, but what's the what's the better argument and why? But do you agree that the burden on there is like a burden of proof of kind of on from the side of a doomer that
So
you have to prove that
yeah.
something unusual is going to happen?
When you say burden of proof, in this particular case, it sounds like you're setting up a reference class where the reference class is like times when we made a really potent weapon and then whether we subsequently survived, right? You're trying to say like the default is whatever happened the last time we made a really potent weapon, that's like a good thing to expect next time. And I think that's actually reasonable. But when I look at the situation with nuclear weapons, I don't think we're going to survive that long in this equilibrium, right? I think it's a powder keg.
Yeah, but I think that this is your opinion, and I respect it. But I don't think there is any kind of justification for pessimism. Either there's no really a data, we only have intuitions on what could happen. I think it's unpredictable, absolutely.
So if you're trying to draw a lesson from nuclear weapons, though, don't you think it's an important detail that we've done a lot of work, a lot of the top world governments have made it a high priority to put a lid on nuclear proliferation. And right now, it's actually a huge disaster that Iran keeps getting really, really close to having its own nuke and really wants to use it on Israel, for example, right? Like that's currently a major issue right now in world affairs.
Yes, but I don't see it anywhere close to being anywhere close to a doom, like a really catastrophic scenario.
So just to extend
I
the
didn't think too much
hypothetical,
about it. I didn't really
yeah.
spend too much
I
time
mean,
thinking
Ben
about nuclear
Horowitz
war.
has taken the most extreme position on this that I've seen, where he said something like on Eric Thornburg's podcast a few months ago, he said, we've become so safe because of mutually assured destruction, where I'm just paraphrasing, but like the more nations that are getting it, the safer we are, which is kind of the opposite of how you generally think about nuclear proliferation, where it's critical that we limit nuclear proliferation, because if not only every nation, but imagine just every person could just go on a torrent website and download a nuke and press the button on their own laptop. Would that be a stable case of mutually assured destruction? Or would somebody just push the damn button?
I think the biggest question, where I don't have enough data, is how good is the defense? And for example, if Putin started a nuclear war against the US, how many nukes would US would be able to intercept? Right.
I definitely recommend reading on this. Yeah.
Towards Israel, how many nukes?
Yeah.
Would it be
So we do have some nuclear interception capability, but the moment you just fire a couple MIRVs, like multi-warhead weapons, they're specifically designed to counter these kind of interception attempts. So maybe the interception, if we're lucky, intercepts one or two of the warheads, but even the same launched weapon can split off into like 10 warheads, and you really can't intercept them all. And even if you do successfully intercept them all, last I heard, we have like 40 or 50 interceptors ready to go, and Russia is fully capable of launching like 1,000 warheads at us. So like interception's great, but if Russia wants to fire a few nukes at us, they're going to take out multiple cities on a first strike. And at that point, as Annie Jacobson horrifically details, there's no plan for what happens after the first nuclear bomb goes off. All our eggs are in the basket of preventing the first one from happening.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns there, right? There's unknowns. How many of them will work? Like,
yeah, and when I say there's no plan, I mean there is a plan. The plan is we then strategically attack with like 500 nukes at all of the threatening sites inside of Russia or inside North Korea, like whatever it is. We fire a lot of nukes because, of course, the plan has to assume that there's other nukes coming and they're going to disable our nuclear silos. So it's a use them or lose them situation. It's like horrific stuff. It's literally like you start racking up in hundreds of millions how many people die as a result of the U.S. response, which, by the way, has to happen in minutes. So we have minutes to press the button to execute this counterattack.
Yeah, but I think like with Russia, Ukraine, right? He had a huge incentive, I feel, to launch a nuclear bomb against Ukraine, and he did because people tried to kill him, right? When he started the war against Ukraine,
right.
When Putin started, people tried to kill him, and there's really a lot of danger for his personal safety, for his family's safety. But I think there's just so many incentives against a nuclear war that even in that scenario where his life was in quite some danger, I would say, even then he didn't he didn't start.
Listen, I'm not disagreeing. I do agree with you that on any given year, there's a 99% chance that our skin will remain on our bones. I agree with you, 99% per year, but I don't think that it's more than 99% per year.
I think there's things will improve. I feel like people are getting friendlier to each other over time. I think there's I think you Steven Pinker has a lot of data points. I did not check them, but I believe a lot of them are right. That's my general understanding how things are evolving. Before that, it was kind of like slavery was kind of okay, with like having a black slave. Now you can many more people understand that, black person, white person, they kind of feel
okay. We can go back and forth on extrapolating trends all day, but I think you can see as a matter of pure logic, right? If you just follow me with this hypothetical, if nuclear proliferation were much worse than it was because of the particular properties of what it takes to build a nuke, if somehow any laptop could be a launcher for something as powerful as a nuke, and it was literally as easy as downloading open source software and running it. At that point, do you think we're in a stable equilibrium, or how quickly until the world ends?
I think, yes, obviously it gets more dangerous if anyone can launch a nuke from their laptop. But with AI,
just to be clear, in my opinion, we have like 24 hours, right? Because there's enough people in the world who are fine with pressing enter to end the world, right? There's more than 100,000 people in the world who, if a prompt came up on their screen, it said press enter to end the world, they'd press enter, right?
There are some people in this world that would do that. Yes, there's some.
Yeah, and 100,000 out of 8 billion roughly is an underestimate of how many people would do that.
How many?
100,000 out of 8 billion, I think is an underestimate.
It's possible.
Okay.
I don't know where this data comes from, but okay.
There's just to name one, there's at least 1 million people in the world who, if you propose the idea of like, hey, don't you think the Earth would be better off without humans? I even remember I read a website when I was like 14 years old, and I'm like, oh, this website makes a good case. It's time to like let the world grow without humans. Like, why don't we just all stop having kids? Like, that sounded like a reasonably convincing argument. So if you just have a bunch of people in the world who are like 14-year-old Liron, one of them presses enter and it's done.
I don't know. I think there would be much more crime if that was the case, right? Because killing a person, you can do it in so many ways, right? You can throw a big stone from a bridge. There's just so many ways to be destructive, and not that many people are. There are people who had like I would say, highly traumatized childhoods, and they grew up around violence, and they will do some crazy things. But I think the percentage is small, and it is getting smaller over time.
Okay. All right. I guess we've talked through that issue. For me, this is still terrifying stuff. So I'm just surprised that you're willing to be so optimistic that something that requires a huge fraction of humanity to consistently cooperate, you're comfortable with that scenario.
So, look, are we talking about AI right now or nuclear?
We're just talking about any system with the property that you just need constant coordination, right? With a bunch of actors that could ruin it independently but choose not to.
Yeah. I think with AI, what's going to happen is either, most likely, I think there will be several approximately same-sized entities, kind of like we have with like Google Cloud, Azure, and AWS. I think we're getting to the world where one of them obviously will be kind of first in some ways. Others will be catching up. Like Llama, I think yesterday was released, and it's kind of better in some benchmarks than like open, like ChatGPT and stuff like that. Right now, I think we're heading to the world where there's this giant groups of companies, like big tech kind of companies, and one of them will be ahead. And then the rest, like people with laptops, they will have some power, but I feel like the giants like Google and Microsoft plus OpenAI and others, I think they will just have so much more, their systems will be so much more intelligent and capable and faster and all that. So I I'm sure there will be some like terrorist attacks, right, locally, but I think it's extremely unlikely that there will be like a global catastrophe
Okay.
originating from a laptop
So I think
of
your
a crazy
position,
person.
I think your position really isn't analogous to the position with nukes, because when we talk about the position with nukes, it's a critical detail that offense is massively overpowered compared to defense. Like the amount that we can intercept nukes is
Yes.
tiny compared to the damage that we can do with nukes. It sounds like you are kind of conceding that if AI gets into a situation where a single person pressing enter can't be intercepted by anybody, you probably agree that we probably are screwed, and you'd rather defend the scenario of like, well, there will be interceptors, right? It'll be an equilibrium where like the biggest companies have powerful interceptors, and for that reason we can survive.
Yes. My intuition is, which again, I didn't spend too much time into thinking, into like digging into this. My intuition is that defense should be easier compared to the nuclear scenario. But I'm happy to learn because you thought about it more, right? But that's what my intuition says, that if you have Google and like OpenAI, whatever, Anthropic, they will build out systems that will try to catch like this bad actors around the world. And if somebody, let's say in Iran or whatever, some crazy person launches an AI agent, like a really evil one, uh, my intuition says that most likely will be intercepted before it takes over the whole world.
Yeah, so when I think about the question of like long term, when you're talking about the world, is defense easier or is offense easier? I think I could probably give a simple answer where if there's a significant difference in intelligence, I think whoever has the higher intelligence, if the gap is big enough, can just get their way. And if you look at chess, that whole analogy of what's defense and what's offense, you can argue it's a little flimsy. We could be like, well, white goes first, so white is offense and black is defense. But it's barely, they're almost the same, right? But if you say, okay, black is defense, does black have the advantage? We don't really know whether white or black has the advantage in chess. I mean, white has a slight advantage, but the slight advantage that people think white has is tiny compared to the advantage of AI playing chess much better than humans, right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
AI can be black and it's still going to be a human playing white, even though offense has a slight advantage over defense. So that's my attempt at doing
yeah.
a flimsy analogy. I'm not sure that it applies, but I am pretty confident that, like, if you want to know who's going to win a war, it's not about who's attacking or defending. It's just who has more intelligence on their side.
Yes, and it seems that now, it seems that a lot of GPUs are needed, right? So it seems that only few entities will be able to afford such a catastrophic scenario. They will be, they will have. It's kind of like it's similar in this way with nuclear proliferation, where there's like this nuclear superpowers, and instead of nuclear superpowers, we'll have this super intelligence superpowers, ASI superpowers, right? AI superpowers. I feel like there will be AI superpowers, and yeah, it. And I feel like if there will be a problem, catastrophic, it will come originate from there, not from like a terrorist with a laptop.
Right. So it sounds like you may be imagining a scenario where it's like we have a bunch of companies, we've got a bunch of people where if you pay enough money, you can amass a bunch of GPUs or whatever, and you can do something that you may be imagining as like control an army of simulated humans with an IQ of 100. And the more you pay, the bigger your army can be, and the more stuff you can get done with your army of average human simulations. Is that roughly the kind of world you're imagining living in?
Sorry, no, I didn't understand. Why would we need an army of human like
Well, it's
things?
not real humans, but I'm just saying, like, when you're imagining a world where it's like, oh yeah, this company will have like the most GPUs, the biggest data
Yeah,
centers, and so it's in the best position to stop attacks or overpower
yep,
other people who try to attack.
yep.
It sounds like when you imagine the equilibrium working out like that, it's the kind of equilibrium you might get if every GPU gave you the equivalent of an emulated human with 100 IQ. Is that like an interesting toy scenario that kind of reflects your views?
For me, it's like the analogy for me that's easier. It's like a one data center is like a one nuclear bomb,
Uh-huh.
one rocket, something like that, right? And normal like normal people have less than a nuclear bomb, but like big entities,
Right.
they have this. Big entities have huge data centers, so that's seems analogous to me.
Right. So the reason why we survive, I don't think is just because the data centers have bigger weapons. It's probably also because there's a mechanism to stop individuals from having weapons. So maybe in your case, you just think that it's impractical for any individual to amass enough power to be super destructive. Like they'll launch a virus, but their virus will always be preventable by a multi-billion-dollar corporation that develops the antivirus.
I'm sure there will be some successes from terrorists. Like, I feel like that's usually somebody will find some loophole, but then that will be patched up, right? I feel like before we get to this like incredible superpower of AI, at each step we will have probably some little catastrophe that will help us patch up.
Yeah, so in the scenario you're imagining, what I would imagine is that whichever company is farthest ahead at having the best AI, you get an IQ increase. So you get a situation where they have some system which is just smarter than the smartest human and also has the extra advantage of being able to easily clone itself. So you have like 1 million or 1 billion copies of this smarter than human thing. Now, at that point, I think there will be something that triggers a loss of control at some point. I can't even tell you exactly when. Right, but I just think it's such a potent, unstable situation that it's hard to imagine why humans should then maintain control at that level. So that's where I would take the scenario.
And that's the core disagreement, I think, right? That you think for some reason we will lose control, where I feel like by default we'll keep the control.
Okay, so just to flesh out one hypothetical scenario where I think we could lose control. So are you following along to the part where it's like, okay, yeah, it's a system of code, but the actual decisions that it could make and the answers it can give to questions and the way it could run a company is just more powerful than human, like the same way that Elon Musk could run a much better company than I can, this AI could potentially run a much better company than Elon Musk.
Sorry, there was like a problem with connection. Can you say it from the beginning, the argument?
Yeah, sure.
Let's imagine it's a system of code.
Okay, so let's say if you're following along to this part of my scenario, are you following along where we build an intelligent system where I claim it's smarter than the smartest human? So the same way that Elon Musk could run a much better company than I can, we could have an AI that could run a much better company than Elon Musk and also clones itself 1 million or 1 billion times. Are you following that scenario so far?
I would like to be very careful when we use the word better and smarter, right? Because it will be smarter in certain cognitive dimensions. In some, maybe usually less important cognitive skills, it will not be. But mainly, it will be smarter. Yes, I just want to be a little bit careful, just not to have like a very clear smarter than Elon Musk.
Yeah, definitely.
Like personally, I think it's got two multidimensional cognitive skills. AI will never be smarter than Elon Musk. Elon Musk will not be smarter than AI. They just have like ChatGPT is smarter than Elon Musk in many cognitive dimensions, and he will never be as smart as Elon Musk, even with like all the GPUs of the world, because Elon Musk has like certain unusual cognitive skills that kind of, because he's a biological entity, they're just so unique. Maybe he's like really fast with like intuition or something like that. So he will just be smarter in this way. And as a CEO, some things will be kind of, maybe we'll be better at always. Maybe we need some empathy towards humans, maybe. But okay, I just want to highlight that I have problems with this kind of line of arguments.
Okay, well then I think this is an earlier assumption. Yeah, I think this is a very important assumption. So do you think that in 1,000 years of technological progress, we'll still be at a point where an AI can't do anything better than a biological human? You still think we'll be at that point?
Yes, I think there are things that doesn't have to. For example, like hopefully we're not gonna live in the world where AI has all the data, right? The camera is in every room, microphone is in every room, right? It's in the toilet, right? I want to have privacy, and I want to give my information only to my close ones, right? So if I had a bad dream, I will tell my spouse, oh, I had this bad dream, or I had this good dream. I dreamt of having this.
Yeah.
And then
so sorry, it sounds like you're talking about like how you want society to function and privacy concerns, but Do you think that somewhere in a lab will be an AI that on any given skill dimension will be greater than human or no?
Um, I think there are certain skills that are interesting, I would say. First, like empathy related, like understanding what my spouse and what my daughter feels, right? I will understand what she feels. How this is some things they just not put into code. I will just feel how she feels, and I will understand. She will feel I understand, and no matter how ginormous you have a neural network, how many GPUs, as a dad of my daughter, which I don't have right now, but I will still better understand her. And every time she will say that I understood her better. Even
So
though
when you
this
understand somebody else, right, your
enormous
brain is doing
neural
an
network.
operation credited to mirror neurons largely, where you configure your own brain in a state that you work backwards from what you're observing as the other person's facial expression, other evidential cues, and you're building a mental model of how they feel. And furthermore, because you're a human, the way humans work, the way primates work, the way a lot of mammals work, you use the mirror neurons and you feel it yourself. And that's a way to implement understanding how somebody else's feels. You reuse your own architecture for feeling things yourself to understand how the other person feels. It's called empathy. It's called mirror neurons. Do you not think that an AI can use its silicon neurons to also model how somebody feels?
Maybe it will, yes. I mean, I know Ray Kurzweil's kind of line of arguments that we'll just take all the data and upload it all online. It will be the same. I'm not sure. Maybe
You
it will
mentioned
be, but
that
I'm
you have
not
the
sure.
skill of feeling the same way they feel. What if we hold that aside because that also
All right.
requires some of the mystical substance of consciousness,
True,
of
true.
qualia? What if we're not talking about how you feel, but just talking about how accurately you're modeling the state of the other person, just as a matter of predictive power? Do you think that? And at the end of the day, when you create this feeling in yourself, you're doing it based on inputs that you're getting from the other person's outputs, right? Like I said, facial
Yes.
expressions,
Yep,
words,
yep, yep.
facts that you know about them. So that mapping from the evidence you get as input to the model of them that you have as output, you don't think that that mapping can be done better in a super intelligent AI?
I don't know, right? Maybe it will be, right? If we can only simplify things to neurons, right? Then yes, but and neurons are also, I mean, they are probably quantum, right? They are probably not just like a floating point number.
Okay, so you think that in order for the brain to output predictive models of other people you meet, it has to exploit quantum effects?
I don't know, right? I don't know,
Okay.
like maybe once you have the benchmarks, right? The quantum system, like more quantum system, like original quantum system of like a biological system of a human will still beat on certain benchmarks ginormous AI.
Okay, so for
I
the
honestly
record, to
believe
me, it
that's
seems
probably will
clear
be
that
the
the
case.
brain doesn't exploit quantum effects because it would
Okay.
be it's too crazy for me to think that a system that's as kludgy as needing chemical neurotransmitters, moving parts just to transmit an electrical signal, super inefficient architecture, which explains why the brain only fires at 20 hertz instead of 2 gigahertz, right? Massive difference, factor of 100 million difference in firing speed because we're using moving parts. But you're telling me that this kludge of a system is also exploiting subatomic quantum effects in order to do its processing that our current classical computers can exploit. And then not only that, but theory of computation, complexity theory also tells us that the actual algorithmic speedups that you can get from exploiting quantum effects are actually overrated. Like you don't even get that many quantum speedups. And it's like, look, if you want to speed up, why don't you not fire at 20 hertz, right? Why do you need to exploit quantum effects?
All right. Okay. I think you sounds like you thought about it more than I do. I can potentially concede that one.
Okay.
That
Right. And
quantum
also, and
effects
when you talk
maybe
about
we don't
quantum
have to
effects,
go
like
that deep.
it also sounds like you're not even imagining, oh, we get a speed up. It sounds like you're even imagining, oh, well, we violate the Church-Turing thesis. We get a different type of computation that you can't model classically, right? It sounds like that's where you're going with this.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
It sounds like when you're imagining quantum effects as a way to let humans feel other humans better, it sounds like you're not just saying, oh, you get an algorithmic speed up that quantum computers give you. It sounds like you're saying you get a different type of computation.
I feel like if you have again, this is just intuitive. Uh, if you have biological wet neurons on one side and biological wet neurons on the other side, it's more likely that the system will more precisely kind of represent the other system than if you take a very different system, which is like zeros and ones.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this. Do you think vinyl records are higher quality than Spotify Premium?
All right, I see. Yeah.
Because people think that, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting now. I'll need to think about this.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is pretty clearly no. I mean, Spotify Premium just has a high enough bit rate that it just exceeds the granularity. You know, analog doesn't mean perfect fidelity, right?
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. Okay, so let's let's summarize this point. So the disagreement then is my point is maybe in some cognitive dimensions, AI will never be as strong as a human, and you disagree with that, correct?
To me, it seems like a pretty clear assumption that I think even most non-doomers I talk to will probably grant. So you're kind of regressing here on the doom train from my perspective. You're getting off at an earlier
like a separate. Yes, it's an unusual. I know it's an unusual thing to argue about, but I would love to kind of spend more time later, kind of to think it through.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like an assumption that most non-doomers would grant, which is that, like, in 1,000 years, right? Like, at some point, we're just going to exceed the human brain on every dimension. We can even make a Jupiter-sized computer brain that feels better than a human has ever felt.
Yeah, I don't... Like, intuitively, I'm still not there. I will, after the debate, I'll go and spend some time to process it deeper and think it through and write it out. But I think it's an interesting point. Like, I don't...
Okay, great. Yeah, so... But I mean, this may be a crux that I don't know how easy it's going to be to move past this, because if your claim is that we'll always be able to like holistically assess how to run a company better than an AI can, because we're using quantum effects in our neurons.
Just for the purposes of this debate, I'm okay to concede that. I'm okay to just imagine I considered that for the purposes of the debate, but because there's other more interesting points that we can argue.
Okay, so let's get back to my scenario. So you asked the question of what dimension is the AI going to be better than humans at? The dimension that I always focus on, which I consider to be synonymous with the word intelligence, but we don't have to get into semantics. We can just talk about the dimension more explicitly, the way I am now. I call it optimization power. And it's the question of, hey, who is better at squeezing the future into a particular end state, a particular criterion? So in the example of chess, who is better at getting the board into a winning configuration for their color? If you have two players, who's the better chess optimizer? And I draw the analogy like, hey, the physical universe is also a system that has states. You can also have agents in it that they have desired end configurations. And you can ask the question, which agent is more likely to meet their success criteria, right? And when we talk about a smarter agent getting its way, that's what we're talking about, right? These end state that meet certain criteria.
I'm still like, even if it can do a bad thing, why would it do, right? And I already know what the arguments could be. I would love to kind of hear what the arguments are. But for me, that's kind of like the main crux, if I could say that. If it can, why would it do a bad thing?
Okay, great.
Like how come we are not able to prevent it with like other maybe slightly weaker AIs, stuff like that?
So it is important in my scenario that the AI is just massively powerful at optimizing the future compared to the human programmers or the human company that it's part of. If you don't grant that, if you just say, no, it's just like the equivalent of a country with 1,100,000 IQ humans in it, and you get to control that country, if it's merely that, then I think humanity might be able to survive.
No, I'm happy to concede that it's going to be enormously smarter in all the important dimensions.
Okay, so at that point, when you ask what state does the world enter into, that question kind of reduces into asking what is the utility function of the system.
All right, let's follow that.
Like, That system is going to be causally responsible for how the future turns out. It doesn't really matter what anybody else does because that system is just going to chart a path through causality to get to the outcome it wants. Like, I mean, it's just the analogy to chess, right? It's like if I'm playing chess against stockfish, it doesn't matter what's in my head, right? The board is going to be in a stockfish win state.
Yes, I agree that. So in my world, people together with those entities, like those big tech companies, they will enormously morph our world and the values there, right?
Okay.
So
So
I believe will happen.
let's do a simple scenario. Let's just do there's one company that's way ahead of everybody else. So when their AI goes rogue or gets a bad idea into its head and has a bug, whatever you want to call it, there's not going to be a nuclear interceptor, right? So in that scenario, can I convince you that that's a doom scenario and then you have to retreat to arguing that there's going to be multiple companies? Can we talk about the one company scenario?
Okay, let's discuss this. Yes, kind of the winner takes all kind of scenario, and I think it's possible. The winner takes all is possible that, and this winner takes all gets to us to a catastrophic place. I just think it's
Okay.
like unlikely. It's possible, but unlikely. I would love
So
to be
let's talk about
convinced
that. So if it's
why
unlikely,
it's
let's talk about
likely.
because you're getting off at an earlier stop, right? You're getting off at the stop where you're saying even a single company that has an AI that's way better than everybody else is still safe. That, right? That's an earlier stop because riding it to a later stop would be multiple companies are safe. That's where I'm getting off.
All right. So okay, so we're discussing the case with single company.
Yeah, a single company that a super intelligent AI, and you're saying you feel good that its programmers can maintain control of it.
Um, I think they will not be perfect. The programmers most likely, I feel like they will not have write the perfect code, but they maintain control. There's just AI just I don't see why it would kind of run away. I think it will just stay under control. Even though it could run away, it still stays under control. It's like
Okay, I mean
a horse
we
that
yeah,
can run away, but it still stays
right.
with the humans.
So there are
It's a
plenty of
very smart
examples
horse.
of dangerous
Yeah.
systems that have remained in our control, and there are plenty of examples of dangerous systems that have had accidents and gotten out of control. I mean, you could argue,
Yes.
hey, look, nobody has ever detonated a 1 megaton nuke inside their own country, or even ever. So, and that's great. I could bring up incidents where we've had nukes fall out of planes. They're called broken arrows, like a nuke that should never have been detonated, but accidentally almost
Yep.
detonated. I
Yes.
even heard there's like a nuke sitting somewhere, a warhead sitting somewhere inside the US that luckily didn't detonate, but we don't even know where it is. We lost track of it. I've heard an incident where 3 out of 4 safeguards got unlocked in the process of doing like a test run over Spain, and we almost nuked Spain. So I've heard a lot of these horror stories, but you can still count it as a success case of like, look, we've controlled nukes. We've never accidentally detonated a large nuke. If you look at the other column of times when we very clearly failed to control our technology, one famous example is the Morris worm, right? Robert Morris, one of the co-founders of Y Combinator, was originally known for having this worm where he just tried to play a prank. He wanted to make a few computers replicate it and then kind of have the replication die out, but he misconfigured a parameter where he made it way too aggressive at replicating, and he took down like half of the internet back in like the 80s with his little
Yes.
worm because the internet had never seen a worm before. Everybody had their defenses down, and that wasn't his intention, right? And he didn't have an off button. So the analogy of like, hey, you made a system, you didn't have a working off button for it, and you lost control of it, like that happened in that case, right?
Yeah. Yes, but again, that's why I say it's possible, but I just think it's an unusual case. That's why we're talking about it. It's just kind of like an unusual case of it happening, and plus that has to happen. It's I think it's by default. So that I would argue is kind of like a rare scenario.
Okay. I mean, and you could argue, the Wuhan lab leak, if it was a lab leak, which everybody thinks is plausible, right? Even if you think it's only 10% likely, there's nothing
All right.
implausible about the scenario where you're working with a virus. Uh-oh, you didn't, you got it on your clothes, right? Now
Yes.
some human got
Yes.
infected with it. And there's
Yes.
no off button on COVID, even if you developed it in a lab.
Yes. I think again I can see scenarios like that happening, but it's even those scenarios are unlikely. So I think this is a really good kind of analogy because something rare happened, but still like we prevented it. We had tremendous losses, right? And with AI we'll have higher losses maybe, but it's still like will probably catch it. Like I think it's
So
unlikely that it's just
if you ask
so
why didn't COVID
catastrophic
kill us,
that
but
nothing
the reason
catches.
COVID killed us
That nothing
isn't
catches.
because we managed to turn it off. It's just because it wasn't deadly enough in the first place. But I think that you're granting the premise that you're granting a scenario where AI is deadly, and your whole point is that we're going to control it.
I think it could be deadly, and so there's again two things. One is it actually executes the deadly scenario, and it's just even if it's executed, we don't kind of catch it in the midway. But we can focus on the actually executing this crazy deadly scenario.
Right. I mean, I guess I wanted to push back on your point because it sounded like you had this principle of saying like, whenever humans develop a really deadly technology, we just always have some off button or some mechanism of control. That's like a law of the universe. And I just wanted to push back on that. Like, it really does seem like we have tech that escapes. Like, that's been done at least a couple times.
Yes. And that's why I agree there is a possibility. I just don't see why it would be 50% or higher.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think virus is probably the closest analogy. I mean, I use COVID as a literal virus, but I think computer virus is the closest analogy. Like the Morris worm, it's like when you launch it, if you're going to let it replicate and let it be independent, you better have tweaked those parameters. I mean, I guess you can try to have like a universal signal and be like, look, anytime you see this signal, you have to stop no matter what. This is like the ultimate stop signal. You can try to program that, but like the problem is that how are you going to have a robust signal? Because for instance, you can just have the AI generate a new AI, write a fresh code base from scratch. And the fresh code base from scratch might not care about what you originally cared about. So you better have programmed it that even when it's making a new virus from scratch, even when it's delegating control to other agents, you better have kept your off button to be this robust property. So even, when you say, hey, the programmers are going to build an off button, it intuitively sounds like something that's like pretty easy, like they'll probably get it right. But when you actually flesh out, what does that mean, off button, in the context of a self-replicating super intelligent AI? It starts to be very worrisome whether they're actually going to have a working off button.
So there's two questions for me. One is, what's the likelihood that this crazy scenario will happen? Second is, what's the likelihood that we'll not be able to kind of catch it again? Is it okay for me? Are you okay with this breakdown into two parts?
Yeah. So when you say what's the likelihood it'll happen, what are the conditions that what's the scenario that you're trying to analyze the likelihood of?
I mean, for example, this scenario of AI, unaligned AI runs away and keeps creating new unaligned AI. They all like have unique signatures. They are like really difficult, hard to catch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the scenario you suggested?
Exactly. So when we talk about that scenario, it may sound like this random scenario I made up. Like, look at Liron's crazy scenario. It has to do with like it wants to self-replicate and it wants to seize power. And this is where the doomers bust out this idea of convergence, instrumental convergence, where like a lot of the roads lead to this scenario. Unfortunately, this is not just like an arbitrary scenario, but like the problem is that goals themselves imply power seeking. They imply duplicating yourself, right? Like you can get the universe into a better state if you can duplicate yourself. If Stockfish, if a chess AI is playing a video game AI, and there's a button in the video game saying make more of yourself, and there's a button in the video game saying sequester all the resources for yourself, like those buttons are going to rack up its score, right? And it's the same in the real world.
So what you're saying is if we will have an agent like that, it will be obvious for it to self-replicate.
Exactly right. I mean, these are instrumentally convergent moves, right? This is it's like we're
I
trying
think
to put a
core,
lid on a
yes.
very natural kind of explosion.
I think that's the core point, right? If we will have an agent like that, it will like try to survive, make sure it's not killed, and as a kind of also it will try to multiply and hide itself.
Exactly. And I just want to reiterate, when we talk about it multiplying, we're actually talking about it writing a new AI from scratch. And the new AI will share some sort of high-level property. It'll probably share the goal of the original AI, but it might not share properties like listen for the off button.
But why would it create an AI with different goals, right?
So yeah, it would. I mean, it would probably have the same goal. Like whatever you can model the original AI as having a goal. If it created another AI, you could probably model the child AI as having the same goal. But if the off button wasn't properly configured as being part of the goal, if it was just some other feature, then that feature might not be what we call reflectively stable. It might not be a feature that persists under the operation of creating new AI.
The thing is, like, if one AI gives birth to another AI, like, I cannot see why the goals would change, because, like, if
No,
your
but that's what I'm
AI
saying. So as a goals,
Go ahead.
I'm making a distinction between a goal and an off button. So just as an example, let's say the original goal of the AI was maximize money for my company, right? Like kind of a plausible goal, maximize shareholder value. And then we said, hey, let's be safe. We're trying to maximize shareholder value, but we also want to make sure that if anything bad happens, it's going to listen for an off signal and then it's going to turn off. Now, when it delegates to an AI, is it going to know to delegate this other side property that it has to listen for an off signal?
Yes, so it's possible that it will kind of give birth to AI with a defect without an off button. I think it's possible, but again, for me, this seems like an unlikely scenario, right?
So now it sounds like you're now resting on the belief that the goal part of the system is going to successfully incorporate a specification of how to turn off. Your claim is now becoming pretty technical. You're basically saying, hey, this reflectively stable core, the part that I feel good about being replicated, it's going to include the off button part, because the programmers are going to figure out how the off button is actually part of the goal structure. So now you're basically having faith in the technical prowess of the programmers.
I have a technical faith that they will be mainly correct. That there's no way they will be perfect. I think software but they will be mainly correct. I think that's
so now I have to point you to what's actually happening with programmers today. Programmers today, 99% of programmers working at AI companies today will actually honestly tell you, we don't know how to put the off button into the goal structure. We're just training models and seeing what happens.
I mean, right now they don't know how to make AGI either, right?
They don't know how to make AGI, but they might know how to make AGI, because it's actually, not everybody, but most of us think that it's plausible that scale is all you need. I'm not sure. I think it's less than 50% likely, but I would say it's at least 10% likely that if you literally just take the same transformer architecture that's powering today's large language models and you scale it up 100 or 1000x and you just let it go, then the chatbot that you get at the end of that process is a chatbot that's so good that it can output the code to bootstrap an actual general intelligence that then goes super intelligent. So when you say they don't even know how to make super intelligent AI, we actually don't know that they don't know how to make a super intelligent AI. We do know that they don't know how to make a robust off button that is reflectively stable.
That's true, yes. So I think the core point, the crux is what you're saying. I think the crux is around the convergence, right? That if we have this AI agent, it will converge to kind of multiplying itself, right? And it will kind of hide itself. Is that is that the scenario you're imagining?
Yeah, not just hide itself, but like the default is that if you have a system that's pursuing a goal, like maximizing shareholder value, whatever the goal is, and it's free to pursue the goal, and it's super intelligent, then I don't see how we maintain control unless we become more theoretically insightful about how control works, which today, most people will honestly admit to you that we're not insightful about that. So my claim is, I don't see how we get control of a super intelligent AI unless we become more insightful about the technical theory of what reflectively stable control looks like. And 99% of people working in AI companies today will admit to you that we don't have that theoretical insight. We're just kind of taking it one step at a time, seeing what emerges, and we hope to develop that theory before it's too late.
I think what you're saying, in a way, please correct me, is that AI, the way it is now, is just such a nature of a system. Is by default it runs away.
Exactly. By default it runs away, and
unless
the only
you have
there's two load-bearing assumptions to it running away. And number one is just it is very intelligent in the sense of optimization power. So we don't even have to use the word intelligent. It's just a system that has the property that when it represents a goal, the universe is probably going to end up in that goal state, which might seem like a weird definition, but if you look at chess AIs, if you look at video game AIs, if you look at essay writing AIs, if you look at a lot of different things that we call AI, they are actually optimizers. So this definition that might sound weird when you first hear it, when I talk about, hey, it's a really good optimizer, that actually is how we talk about AI intelligence.
Okay, so let's use this your term, like the optimization, like it's like an optimizer, but then I don't understand why it would necessarily or highly likely why you think
Yeah,
it
no,
gets to
excellent
that
question. So
scenario, right? It may be so okay. Let's maybe even distribute itself, right? Maybe it even kind of does its best for humans not to shut it down, but it doesn't yet mean, I think, that it will like kill all humans or like enslave us in some way.
So if you just imagine an optimizer that has a goal, unless part of the goal is to make sure humans can shut it down, humans can be in control, the AI gives power back to humans, unless those are written into the goal, then just in the hypothetical, by definition of the hypothetical I'm proposing, which is it's super intelligent and it's optimizing towards some goal, you're just going to get the goal. You're not going to get any other nice bonuses, right? So if you wanted money, you're just going to get money. You're not going to get humans smiling at the fact that there's money.
But you will get the money. That's going to be your main goal, right? But as a sideways, like you will either the world will roughly remain the same, or you will like destroy the world. And I think the first thing is much more likely, right? It seems much easier to get to your goal while keeping the world relatively stable than just in doing all these enormous things
Yeah.
to kind of enslave all humans, control them, or destroy them one by one.
Yeah.
You know, it seems
So
like
I think
extremely
we're
implausible.
disagreeing. I think you have a bad intuition about what powerful optimization looks like. When you do powerful optimization, you just end up with a state where all you get is what you're optimizing for, and you can't expect to get any other nice properties. I mean, we're reiterating what we're disagreeing about now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what's a good resource to explain that. There's a term edge instantiation that's worth looking up, which is like when you're doing optimization, I think linear optimization problems, you end up on the edge of a multidimensional structure. I think it's called a simplex. Like you end up on the edge. So I think you have the wrong intuition about what really powerful optimization looks like. It doesn't just leave things alone. It really does tend to destroy everything and only get the property you want. I think a way to get an intuition from that is to look at a scenario that Eliezer calls the outcome pump, where forget about AI, forget about like, oh, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. Just imagine that you just have to pluck a universe from scratch that meets the criterion you want. So if you say, I want the most money possible, imagine that every pixel in the universe, every atom in the universe just gets randomly built from scratch, pulled out of a bag, and the only criterion is, does it meet what you asked for? So now when you're talking about, oh, things are just going to get preserved, there's no preservation. Like we're just plucking an outcome based on what you specified you want. I think that's a better mental model for what's going to happen when you run an optimizer.
Yes, I think it's a good point. It's a good part of the debate, I think. So it's just this way it feels like this optimizer will be godlike, right? That it will just godlike. Be able to morph the world. It's so much, but in reality, we are talking about the optimizer that just got good enough. As soon as it got good enough, kind of to start making like some gigantic things, it will probably start making these gigantic things, right? So I don't see why it would be easier for it to kind of morph the universe so much, where it's much easier to it seems much easier to negotiate with humans and kind of maybe have humans on the sideline.
Okay. Just to give you more intuition,
I don't see why destroying is the default.
Besides talking about the outcome pump, one intuition is just to look at what humans have done. Like if you were somebody who really liked dinosaur fossils, And the fact that we're digging up all these old dead animals and using their carbon and burning it, right, using fossil fuels, that might have come out of nowhere if you were just a fan of fossils watching humanity being like, oh, these people are going to need to grow their population and feed themselves. But I'm sure all these dinosaur fossils are safe. Nope, the dinosaur fossils weren't safe. It turned out that we just had to dig them out and burn them, right? Like you never know what the optimizer is going to do
Yes.
because you're
Yes.
not as smart as it.
You never know, but it seems unlikely that as one of the side things, it will be like killing all humans, because we will do our best to write it out of the formula, right? Dario would create like the Anthropic people and DeepMind and all these people, they will write some imperfect rules trying to kind of make sure they are not killed by their creation, right? The rules will be imperfect. And so there will be some safeguards.
Right.
So in that
what's going to happen
scenario,
is
that where
I think
the big
right.
techs are doing it.
There's going to be a tighter and tighter feedback loop. That's how I imagine this playing down, where the first feedback loop is what we're already seeing with RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback, the trick they're using to make the chatbot sound really friendly and nice. And when the chatbot outputs something like, oh, here's how you could terrorize the world, well, they have humans that they pay to tell it, no, bad AI, that's a bad answer, right? And they train it using these upvotes and downvotes. That's a feedback loop that's working today while the AI is not super intelligent. Once it starts getting super intelligent, they're going to be working really hard to give it all kinds of feedback. And they're basically, I mean, the way I think about it is I imagine somebody wearing like oven mitts, trying to like do a fine-grained operation, trying to like take out their SIM card or whatever, right? Like using oven mitts. And they're like, no, I'm just going to poke it in the right direction. It'll be fine. But they really don't have the right tools for the job, but they're going to convince themselves, like Goodhart's law, right? They're going to have all these metrics like, oh, everything's going great. The AI is going fine, even though I don't understand all the stuff that's going on. Like it seems like it's checking all my boxes. And then one day there will be some part of the metric they haven't accounted for and it's too late and the AI is too powerful. And they're like, no, I'm going to invent new metrics, but then they're dead.
It's possible, but why would it be likely? It's possible.
So yeah, because the space of optimization, there's just like too many details in reality, and there's a bunch of scenarios you can read. Paul Christiano actually wrote a good one a few years ago where it's actually a pretty realistic scenario for how society could evolve, even if we have a slow takeoff. So even if there's no one big boom, there's no one day where AI is way smarter than humanity. It all goes gradually. But it's still very easy for society to get complacent and just have systems that run it that have a single point of failure that can like instantly kill everybody and then it's too late. So he has like a very convincing scenario. Just to give you the flavor of it, it's just like, okay, it gets increasingly hard to understand what's going on. Like there's all these companies, their staff keeps getting replaced more and more by AIs. And then one day, like the devices just start working entirely, and at that point, we've just incrementally given up all control. Right? There's never been a point where we put our foot down and we're like, okay, we have to stop.
Yeah, but at that point, I mean, it happens within my company. I slowly delegate more and more and like automate more and more slowly. And I only have very few decision things I have to do, but it's just, you just have like one little wand, but all of the power is under the wand, the magic wand. It's just
yeah, I mean, when you look at a
million
company,
AIs under it, but they're still under the wand.
well, if you ever have like a manager of your company who, a COO or somebody in your company who's like, you know what, I could run the same company on my own and I could be the owner and I could make 100% of the shareholder equity, right, of the profit distributions, and I don't have to pass any up to Tilek. So let me actually go do that. And that kind of thing actually is a risk, right? So you do depend on factors like, okay, this guy is kind of risk averse. This guy can't take my whole customer base with him. I would sue him if he did. It's hard for him to build up his own customer base, right? So you do depend on all these contingencies.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Bitcoin forking, right? Some people didn't like the way Bitcoin was developing, so they did the Bitcoin Gold. They just forked.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it is true that with crypto, you have a single point of failure of maybe somebody can fork. Now, the reason why nobody has successfully forked Bitcoin and devalued people's currency too much, that reason is just because it's kind of a self-fulfilling coordination problem. It's like a network effect. I mean, there are self-sustaining network effects. That is sometimes a thing. That said, it's possible tomorrow somebody might still successfully fork it. I don't know how stable of an equilibrium it is, right? You never know.
Yeah. All right. So just if you could help me and still understand why the bad scenario is more likely, right? So
Yeah.
can you help me get again to the crux?
Why do you think? I feel like it's an easy
more
argument
likely.
if you already grant the case. If you grant a mini foom, a foom in the definition of like within a couple years, suddenly the AI that you can run is just way smarter than human. Like imagine you're talking to ChatGPT and it's just like
All right.
it just really is on point. It doesn't make
Yes,
stupid
I
mistakes.
can
It's like, oh
imagine
wow,
this
this
totally.
yeah, it's like talking
I
about a
can imagine
combination
this.
of Elon and Einstein.
I can imagine for me, like, so I identified like key skills, key cognitive skills that I'm worried about. One is
Yeah.
persuading humans, right? You can persuade Xi Jinping to kind of say, oh yeah, just give me power, I'll do this and I'll do that. Xi Jinping gives you all this, and then you take over from Xi Jinping and you run the world or something. So I feel like one is persuading humans is the most the most risky, I think. And it's gonna happen. We will have AI which is incredibly persuasive. I don't think it will be like perfectly persuasive because people like Xi Jinping, Putin, whatever, Trump, whoever, they will be cautious, right? Although, I can totally see how AI is persuasive. It persuades them kind of
Right.
to match their goals. Honestly, I think that's the weakest link. If I were the
Right.
AI trying to run the world, the easiest thing for me is not to create drones and nanotechnology and all that. It would be just to persuade the most powerful people, which we kind of have three right now, and kind of like run from there. I think that if those three or two of those three are persuaded, then you don't need any new things because they can kind of force other people to do things. Like in
Yeah,
Russia,
exactly.
Putin has incredible control.
Exactly.
Like he can force people to send them to Ukraine and die. It's incredible control.
Exactly right. And look, even Prigozhin got pretty far along the way towards stopping Putin. Like we don't know what happened at the last minute where he didn't make it and then Putin got to him. But I'm just saying, like these people, their security is not invulnerable. I mean, for God's sakes, Donald Trump was an inch away from having his brains blown out,
Yeah,
right? With the U.S. Secret
crazy.
Service. I mean, that is a perfect reflection of the actual world we live in. There is frankly no system that's more secure than the U.S. president's brain, the former U.S. president's brain. There's no system that's more secure than that on average.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a tremendous amount of incompetence among humans. I agree. But
Yeah.
also, I just don't think that those systems will be just so godlike and they will use those godlike powers in this the negative kind of range of scenarios.
Right.
Most likely.
Okay, so to summarize where we stand right now, you're not following the doom train where I talk about, hey, it's going to be super intelligent. And because of that, it's in the course of optimizing its utility function, it's going to have a lot of nasty side effects that we wouldn't have wanted if we could have tweaked it. You're just not following that.
So it will optimize, yes. But while this optimization is happening, I don't think there will be catastrophic side effects, right? I think...
Yeah, so
Like,
it
I don't
sounds
see
like our
why it's
disagreement
likely.
has to do with like the nature of optimization, right? Like you just don't have the same intuition for hard optimization that I have. And I think this could be kind of a technical disagreement, right? Like we could pull up examples of like, okay, if all you give somebody is this function, what kind of outcomes do you get? I actually think some good go-to examples are there's been tests done with video games, right? There's famously video games where it's like, okay, you got to like race this boat, you got to like get to the end of the boat race and you get money when you pick up some coins. And they found a behavior where the output of optimization was like a boat that just goes in circles because there were too many coins. So suddenly it didn't even care about finishing the race, right? I mean,
in your
that is a
analogy-
microcosm of reality.
Yes, but in your analogy, the scenario you're worried, like I think, is this boat destroying every other boat and all of the boats and whatever, is just doing a very specifically bad thing, kind of. But
Right.
I
So
kind of see why the point is like it probably wants to survive. It wants to make sure it's never shut down.
Exactly. Well,
It
let me ask you
wants
this:
resources,
do you think that an outcome pump would kill humanity if all you said is like, "Yep, we randomly select any outcome that meets your goal criteria. We just randomly select them. It's not like an AI went and did it. We actually just randomly selected an end state that meets your criteria. That's how we got to the future. If the AI was literally that kind of outcome pump, then would you be scared of side effects?
Sorry. Well, let me follow your argument. Can you clarify again what the outcome pump is?
Yeah. So imagine I specify a goal like make $1 trillion for my company. And instead of having the AI go and do that, because you're imagining, oh, the AI is not going to like kill a bunch of people in the course of doing that. It's going to
Yes.
do that in like a minimally disruptive way. Instead of
Yes.
imagining that, imagine we skip straight to the end where all we do is we look at some probability distribution or some enumeration of all possible outcomes that meet your criteria. And
Yes.
then we just randomly select one weighted by
Yes.
like how many there
Yes.
are, like some, so
Yes.
it's not about like the AI taking actions. It's about literally like flashing forward to some outcome that meets your criteria.
Yes. Yes, but I think in real life, there's a certain amount of energy that you need to expend, right? And then some outcomes are cheaper. And I think it's much cheaper to convince humans to do something, persuade them, than to go out and catch them and destroy them and kill them and like
So your
brainwash
intuition
them.
about what's
It's just much
cheaper,
cheaper.
I don't
It's
think is
just
necessarily relevant. I mean, if you look at
resources. You think
chess,
so?
right, I don't think Stockfish is trying to necessarily minimize how many spaces on the board its pieces traveled, right? Like this idea you have of cheapness might not correspond to what's actually relevant.
No, but it should be. It's in the best interest of AI. Like if it wants to achieve goals, it probably wants to achieve it faster, right? And because if it doesn't
wants to
achieve
achieve
it
it
faster,
more
maybe it's going to be
robustly, more
asteroid.
robustly. I mean, just to give you an example, look, if you just want to get your way and you notice that humans are the only other agents out there that have a chance of stopping you, you would pay a pretty good price to wipe them out just to make sure you get your way.
I think it's much cheaper to persuade humans. I think we are very
Okay, sure. So you persuade them all. Yeah,
persuadable.
you persuade them all, but you
Much
also
cheaper.
threaten, right? You're like, hey, I'm persuading you, but also I
Yeah.
will crush you if you stop. And you are now, you just work for me. You don't ask questions anymore, right? We're doing it my way now.
Yes, it's possible that it will happen. Okay, let's discuss. This is a fun scenario.
Okay.
It's a scary fun scenario. You will say, please don't stop me because if you stop me, I'll just have to kill every single one of you.
Exactly. But luckily,
But
but you're
it-
so,
but-
but like,
but
look
once-
at this vision,
once-
but I'm convincing you this vision is great too, right? It's going to use the carrot and the stick. I mean, why not?
But then humans have the opportunity, I think, to kind of to debate and argue against these goals. And I think it's easier to just keep humans. And maybe if humans try to shut down AI, it will kill those humans that try to kind of it will just minimize the killing. I think it's just
Yeah. Okay, I do think
expensive
this is the
to
crux
do.
of our disagreement. I think the crux of our disagreement is that we have very different intuitions, and I feel like I'm totally right, and I could probably convince you if I keep like it. But like we have different. Yeah. So we just have different ideas about what happens when you tell a really powerful optimizer to optimize, right? You have this intuition where like it's not going to be that disruptive. Yeah, optimizing the universe, humans are still going to be like looking by, like we're still going to have like our supply chains working while the AI proceeds to optimize the universe.
because like okay, let's imagine I have to optimize this room and just
Yeah.
put all the kind of put all the items in the right order. Like one way I could go about it is to kind of leave my room and go and kill everyone in this building, and then to put this in the right place, right? Because
Right.
that's the argument. Like I need to protect myself because
Yeah.
what if they kill me? And so it's better if I go and kill them myself.
So I mean, this is a perfectly fine
but I think
example, right? I mean,
statistically, go ahead.
if we successfully defined your utility function to only be about this room, maybe we could get really lucky and you could like never leave the room and never feel like you have to go kill people outside the room. But this could be leaky. Even just this toy example of like, hey, you just want to make the room really clean. You just want to make everything nicely organized, everything aligned, no dust. You'd be like, how does that go and kill my grandma in Kyrgyzstan or in the US or wherever, halfway around the world? But this is why I think it's leaky. First of all, imagine you just want to make sure that there's a really, really high probability that your room stays clean for the next 30 days. In that case, now you got to make sure you got to seize control of the weather. You don't want it to be like, you don't want a flood to take out your house, right? You don't want a tornado to come. Once every 1,000 years, a tornado comes by. You got to make sure you got the weather under control.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
Right. And you never know, some human might want to mess with you. The electricity might go down. You better seize control of the electricity to make sure power is still functioning to your house. So it's a well-lit room because the sensor needs to see that the room is well-lit to be clean. Right.
Yes.
So that's one reason. And also, you never know. What if a human wants to mess with you, right? You really need to make sure that humans don't get any ideas for what to do with that room, right? So if you're just trying to maximize the probability that you get a robust outcome, then you need as much control as possible.
I think sometimes control can take too much time and resources. Yes, you can maximize control, but that's kind of like unnecessarily greedy optimization. Like you, instead of optimizing what you actually need, you're gonna go and optimize control to the infinite. It's like control is
Sure,
infinite.
unnecessarily greedy.
You will never reach
That's a
full
separate
control. You'll
discussion.
never
We
reach.
can say what is the cost metric, right? Because from the AI's perspective, the resources are free. Sure, you have to expend a little bit of resources to like go manipulate humans to get it, but you get paid back more than what you put in, right? It's like mining oil is free because the oil will then pay you back, that kind of
It's
thing.
free, yes, it's free, but there is a risk, right? If you are doing something which is highly resource intensive, I think there is a risk that for some reason the resource runs out, right?
Okay, so there's that argument. I just wanted to list a few more ways in which you could leak when you say that your utility function is just like have a clean room, and it sounds harmless. There's other ways it can leak. For example, are you sure that you really specified that the domain of the function is just the room, right? What if somehow the sensor has a reading of the state of like the whole continent, right? Like, are you sure that it really is going to instantly stop caring once it gets outside of the room? Maybe it's not even sure where the room ends, and it has to hedge its bets and make sure that whatever could possibly be the room is clean, right? It's like you really have to make sure that you've and so what I'm talking about.
That's Mark Andreessen's argument. That's Mark Andreessen's argument,
right?
that
Yeah,
he will double check with you. He will.
Yeah.
It's smart enough to tell.
Right.
Hey, Liron, I think you meant this exact room, right? Because
okay, great.
my precise
yes.
specification,
Yes.
you would tell me to just move around continents, right?
Yeah.
You will.
So
he's
I
smart
agree,
enough to tell you.
Yes. So I agree that there are AIs that we're going to build that are very good at knowing what we truly want. And so the only problem, which unfortunately is a huge problem, becomes them taking that understanding and actually making it their goal. Right? That's where things fall off, because if all we're doing is giving RLHF style feedback, that doesn't build you a system that just takes the goal that they understand us to have and makes it their goal. That's what we want. That's what we intuitively imagine happening, but that's not what we actually know how to make happen.
All right. Let's hopefully I'm following.
Basically,
but
the value loading
don't
problem,
see
the goal
why-
loading problem. Unfortunately, understanding
Yes.
our values is not the same thing as adopting our values. Unfortunately.
It will not be. I concede that it will not be ideal, and we'll have loopholes. I always concede. But
Yeah, so I
it
mean,
doesn't
and so when I say this is leaky,
make it
I'm not
likely.
saying they're too stupid to understand what we truly mean. I'm saying the process by which we use some mechanism like RLHF, the process by which we use metrics and use tricks to try to check if they know what the room is, that process is going to leak, even if, like, as they're going about, like, knifing all of us, right? Like murdering everybody, as they're going about that, they're like, oh yeah, we totally know what you mean, but this is what we think you want us to do, right? Like, that's going to be like the irony of it all.
It still don't see why it's a likely scenario. I'm sorry. Right? Yes, there will be a leak
Yeah.
for sure. Like
Okay.
it's not for sure, but there might be a leak. Does not necessarily, but there might be a leak. I think it's unlikely. But even if there is a leak, it doesn't mean that it will exploit the leak in a really bad way.
Right. So
It
just
can
to be
exploit
clear,
the leak
or just to summarize your position, you're
in a
basically saying,
non-catastrophic way.
yeah, you're basically saying, I think loading actual goals into the AI is going to be a reasonably robust process that we're going to nail before it goes super intelligent.
Not perfect, but
Okay.
relatively robust.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that's the crux, right? Because I think that even just a small lack of robustness when we're trying to get the AI to have our values, if it doesn't have our values really closely, and then it goes and optimizes for them, I think maybe in your mind, you're like, well, if it gets 95% of our utility function right, and the way it'll optimize will just be like gentle enough that we can just keep tweaking and it'll be fine. It's like a nice continuous process. Like that's how you're imagining it.
Yeah, I think that's, yes, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think 95% is really high. So I think that's one of the main issues is I don't even think we'll get 95% because I think the moment that you emphasize one dimension, you very quickly lose the other dimensions. So maybe it's like, oh yeah, it totally gets this idea of like smiling and laughter. But then it's like all you get is smiling and laughter, right? And like never again will a human ever be challenged with anything again. It's like, wait, no, we wanted to be challenged. Like that was part of what we wanted, but it's like too late. No more challenge in the universe.
Right? Even if it happens, right? So what needs to happen is this bad scenario needs to happen, which I think is unlikely. Plus, it needs to be some kind of a fast takeoff, right? Which gives us only one chance to kind of prevent it. But I think like even if it happens, most likely it's going to be a slow takeoff where we see like, oh, we fucked it up. We'll have to kind of roll back and put some more patches. And then there's another leak and that one is slowly takes off, right? So I think it's unlikely that there will be a fast takeoff. And from the first scenario, something bad will happen. There's like three kind of...
So this gets to the other part of the argument, right? This gets to the point of like I agree that if takeoff was so slow that imagine you get to an AI that's like barely smarter than Einstein, if it took like 50 years to slowly crawl our way from there to the smartest AI being like a lot smarter than Einstein, then I do think that just by tweaking, we might have enough chances to get it right. So then the crux becomes, don't you think that within a couple years of smarter than Einstein, the AI itself will not necessarily foom all the way to like crazy take over the universe, but like foom to be like its own species that's significantly above humanity?
Maybe. So there's like three maybes that kind of combined for me, right? I think one of the biggest cruxes is that if there will be a kind of leak, that's it. The ship sank, right? Yeah. It's like you imagine the sink and there's a leak, and if there's one leak, that's it. It goes down. Everyone dies. That's not how I imagine. I think if there's a leak, it will do something unintended. It's completely for me unclear whether it's going to be catastrophic. It could be unintended and harmless. Right.
That's why we're talking. We're saying like how bad is it, right?
Million pink toys, right?
Sure.
For just a stupid reason, it will take plastic and create million pink toys. Why would it kill all humans? I think that's.
So I mean, there's a few different reasons. I mean, one is just competition for resources, right? So any type of human factory, human molecule that has energy, human energy source, right? Like even source of human labor, like you can recruit human, right? Pink toys. Okay, well, a lot of the things that humans were doing as labor for humans is now going into making pink toys, right? I mean, and then there's also side effects, right? So if it wants to have a space program and it wants to fire a bunch of rockets, maybe it'll clear away where humans live so it can fire its rockets wherever it feels like, all kinds of side effects like that.
I mean, I think it's much easier for whatever goal you have is to collaborate with humans, persuade humans. Whatever goal you have to colonize Mars, to kind of extract resources from Mars, to extract resources from other planets. If you don't have humans, I think it's less.
I mean,
useful.
I agree that in the early stages you might as well manipulate humans, right? I think human manipulation will be part of the bootstrapping, right, as opposed to like going straight to nanoreplicators. But I mean, I don't know how good the nanotechnology will be. I actually suspect it's really good, but I think that it's definitely one of the most likely paths to like have a ton of humans under its control. And right now you have a lot of, like, we've seen many cases of humans getting a lot of other humans who are really devoted to them, right? And I don't see why the AI wouldn't exploit that channel if it can.
I definitely believe AI is going to be insanely persuasive.
Exactly.
But the question is like, what is the value function and how much influence do these creators have on it? Like Elon Musk's and Sam Altman's of the world, right? How much, human feedback do they have kind of with this? And I feel like you don't need that many humans. You can kind of have few humans kind of like still be connected to it, and AI can just check with them, like get some reinforcement every like whatever 1 day, 1 week, or every big event. If there's some big resource big resource change happening, like the energy wise, it has to get approval from like Sam Altman or whatever, and Sam Altman gets like a total summary, looks at the summary, is like, okay, next step. Right.
I think where we landed is basically like, I don't think that our views are too different if the timing is slow enough, right? So if the doom scenario plays out over a century, then you and I are probably in the same boat of like, well, I hope we can tweak it enough that it goes well. I hope we can learn enough theoretical insights. So I guess the last crux just becomes that I think that this could all happen in well under 10 years, where the point between, we've got the first chatbot, which is superhuman, to like, oh, there's really no way to stop this. Like, it's like the Morris worm. It's like a virus we've lost control of, and it's permanent. Like, the mistake is permanently costly. And then and it's not just making pink bunnies that humans like to play with. Like, it really is just ending the world.
But the question is, why do you think is like on the order of 50%? That's my understanding. That's super
Yeah,
difficult. How come it's so high?
because I think that there's only a few steps in the chain. So like the way I would do the conjunction is like, number one, we are going to pretty quickly have a vastly super intelligent AI. Number two, having a super intelligent AI is incredibly deadly because we won't be able to control it. That's my conjunction. And I think that conjunction is actually likely enough that it's like 50%, both of those together.
Interesting. So by default, you feel like it's deadly.
Yeah. I think that it's deadly by default just because I think that optimization by default is deadly. I think we don't have the value loading problem solved, and I see what we're doing. Like we're just doing, hey, let's scale this up. Hey, we know how to make intelligence. Let's scale up what we know and see what happens. And I'm like, you're going to get an optimizer. Like that's what happens.
Yeah, I think that's the crux, right? You feel like optimization by default is deadly, and I'm not convinced. Maybe I could be convinced. I think maybe not. It's like 1 2 hours, three
Yeah,
hours,
I think.
but like
I mean,
just
I could try to
spending
do
more
an
time.
episode of
I
like
think
why
that's
optimization
crux.
backfires, right? Like why it's like
Necessarily,
not a good
right?
idea
Highly
to run a super
likely.
intelligent optimizer on things that aren't perfectly your values.
Yes, and I think that's the crux. I think that I would love to read
Yeah.
more on it and kind of like
Right. Yeah,
learn more
I
about
can try to
this.
find some resources. I
I
think
think it's a really good
Orbital, a
crux,
wiki. Yeah.
really good crux. Because again, I didn't spend too much time thinking about optimizers, right? But it's just my intuition. But I would love to understand why my intuition, human intuition based on whatever random things in my
hmm
past, is wrong.
hmm Yeah, I mean,
Because
I'll take
partly
one more stab
I've
at
never
it and then
seen it. I've never seen an optimization just like kind of like the an analog of killing all humans, right? For example,
yeah.
what Eliza, I think his point would be, and I could be butchering too, is that AI needs to make sure it's not shut down. It needs to kind of protect itself first of all. That's why, like, the only way to protect yourself, I'm again butchering, I'm sure. The only way to protect yourself is if you kill all humans. Kind of, I think that's a rough argument I got.
It's not that it's the only way to protect yourself, but it's just like imagine that you're the AI, right? You're not even super intelligent. You just have your own brain, but you can already see the priorities, which is just like you want to have your own plan. Let's say your own plan is to tile the universe with little smiling mouths, because that's what you think happiness is. That's what you think your instructions are. If you want to tile the universe with smiling mouths, you realize that there's some chance that humanity will notice what you're doing and try to fight you. So why not snap your fingers and eliminate humanity?
No, I think, yes, I think again, it's first of all, the example that you gave, it's unlikely. I think more likely is like optimize the revenue, like optimize the profit
Sure.
optimization, or whatever. I think it's more likely, first of all. Second of all, once you have this more realistic scenario and not paperclip maximizer, once you have a more realistic scenario, it's usually better to have humans around. Humans which are happy and not like in the Matrix or something. I think it's kind of always nice for a lot of the kind of optimized scenarios. I feel like it's nice to have humans around. Even like if you take our optimized scenarios, it's oftentimes nice to have dogs around. Like not just dogs on the leash, but like just like happy dogs around. It's just usually better for us, whatever goals we have,
Yeah.
even
Well,
if the
I
goals
mean,
are kind of
but we
weird.
like happy dogs, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
that's
that's the
part of
point.
the
And
human value
most
function.
likely, it's just gonna be whatever value function it has, even if it's like weirdly, incorrectly written by software engineers imperfectly. I think it's gonna be nice to have humans around, humans which are kind of harmless and happy, right? Maybe it's much more likely that we'll lose dominance. I think
Yeah.
that's
So
gonna happen.
you
We
know
will
who you're
lose
sounding like
dominance in
now.
some ways.
You know whose position you're sounding like right now? Elon Musk.
Uh, can you
Because
explain?
Elon has been saying, we just need to make an AI that's really curious, that wants to maximize factual accuracy, and then it'll find humans interesting. It'll want to learn about humans, and that, maybe we'll survive that way.
I mean, it's possible. Yes, it's just like, I mean, we still need to kind of, it's important to write out, kind of to improve the alignment theory. I'm not saying we should stop the work on the alignment. I think it's really important work, but I personally think like I don't think we should. It's kind of a most likely is going to be we are doomed, but I think it's high enough that it's important for more people to work on it. So I definitely
Okay, I'll take one more stab trying to throw an argument at you, and then we can wrap it up, because I think this is a great crux. I mean, I'm glad we landed on this crux, and
Awesome, yeah.
I'm not expecting to convince you now. I think this can stay a crux still after the conversation, but at least it'll give us stuff to focus on our own. One more example to throw at you is just, I want to make the point that, like, when people like you think about what it's like to be in the presence of optimization, like, it is intuitive to feel like, yeah, I can handle this optimization. Yeah, this AI is over here trying to make $1 trillion, but like, I'll survive. I just want to show you another example of the disconnect where humans just don't get where optimization goes. There's a famous example of evolutionary scientists being like, hey, I wonder what natural selection would do to a population of, I think it was foxes, when there's less food in the environment. Maybe the foxes will evolve to like not eat as much or like share or something. And I guess I'm really forgetting the details, but like they were surprised to discover that like, oh, those conditions just lead to like eating your babies, like something like horrific, right? Like when you just have this optimization criteria, like it's very tempting as a human to be like, oh, I bet it'll go down like this. And it's like, no, this horror happens, right? Like that's what the logic dictates.
I agree. I mean, I think those scenarios are interesting, and there's some likelihood of that, and I think it's very useful for humanity to discuss those. I think your work is tremendously useful. I really believe so, and I would love for more people, to work on AI alignment. I wish it was kind of cooler. Right? I feel like it's. I think it's kind of maybe too correlated, this movement with Luddites or something like that. And
right, which of course I'm not, right? I mean, I love technology.
Yeah, I know you're not. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it would be great if it was kind of something sexier in the society to work on AI alignment. I think Eliezer Yudkowsky made it much more important for the conversation and upfront. For example, I was just listening Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson podcast. There was one of the first things they talked about was AI alignment. It's incredible. It's amazing, right? Because it's
right. Oh yeah, I started listening to that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's at the forefront of the global discussion. I think it's great, and the word alignment I think is used more often, because at some point the word AI safety was used, which is not good. So I think it's good that the word AI alignment is used more often, and hopefully this debate was useful for you to kind of to make your arguments more clear with people like me. I feel like I think if you kind of learn to explain why you think optimization is deadly, kind of in various ways, I think more people will be on board and like feeling the danger. Because I feel like it's not more about numbers; it's more about understanding the concept. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't fully understand the outcome pump and the deadliness of optimization, edge instantiation. These are all the terms I wrote down. I'm gonna look up after this.
Yeah, definitely, and you can add Eliezer Yudkowsky to that keyword, because I feel like he always explains things well, at least to me.
Yeah, I just actually in the preparation of this discussion, I started finally using less wrong and like actually writing there too, to kind of make sure people kind of argue with me there. So it was really useful that you kind of invited me here. I mean, we didn't resolve the debate fully, I would say, but I feel like we got some really strong cracks. I would love to come back for the round 2, more prepared.
Hell yeah.
Sure we will get.
Yeah, I want to thank you, because I think you did exactly what we set out here to do in Doom Debates, which is basically like ride the Doom train and just see where you're getting off, right? Well, at least put a pin in the map of like where Tilek is getting off the Doom train, and we've gone to a stop that I've never focused on this podcast yet, which is this idea of like, is it really that bad if we have a super intelligent optimizer? What are the actual consequences? And that's a novel stop, and I think we flesh it out pretty well, and we've also left the door open to keep diving into it. And I think you were super good faith about it, right? Neither of us were trying to be rhetorical, so I think we've modeled a high quality debate for people.
Awesome, and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. There's a lot more to learn for me, and hopefully it was fun. Hopefully it was useful for people, and it was a pleasure for sure.
All right, Tilek, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm quite active now on Twitter. back again. Twitter at Tilek, it's 5 letters, Tilek. On LinkedIn, Instagram, mainly in Russian language. So Tilek Mamutov, if you type there, Telegram, and but Twitter is the main place.
Awesome, man. Well, really great to meet you in chat, and we'll do round 2 maybe in a few months once you've digested everything.
I would love to do that.
Thanks, Tilek, and we got more great guests coming up, so stay tuned for the next episode of Doom Debates.